Welcome back to the channel. If you want to see some action-packed 1-2 no limit, you're in the right place.
For the year 2025, I'm trying to make $25 an hour while playing the same amount of hours at both 1-2 and 1-3. Currently on a 3-session skid, so let's see where we stand.
In my last 3 poker sessions, I've ran worse than Benji Molina running around the bases and lost $1,512 in just over 8 hours of play. I guess this was long overdue after our $5,600 upswing, but anytime I lose money, I'm super pissed because it affects our stats. As for 1-2, I've now played exactly 76 hours even in this game and profited $1,854 for an hourly win rate of $24.39, which I'm pretty happy with. As for 1-3, I've now played 77 hours and 25 minutes in this game and profited $4,044 for an hourly win rate of $52.24, which is amazing in the grand scheme of things. But as we saw last week, this number can drastically change, so I can't be content just yet. Combining these stats, I've now played 153 hours and 25 minutes of live poker and profited $5,898 for an hourly win rate of $38.44. Still in decent shape, but need a lot more cushion because there's still plenty of time left in the year. So let's try to get things back on track by heading out to the nicest card room in Northern California, which is none other than Stone's Gambling Hall. But before we dive into this week's poker sessions, I gotta announce that I'm teaming up with the Left Pocket Bankroll app. It's an easy-to-use app that keeps track of all your poker stats and gives a ton of great feedback. I've been super pleased with all the different features, so do yourself a favor and get a 1-month free trial on me by clicking the link in the description or scanning the QR code on your screen. We buy into the 1-2 game for the max of $300 and waste no time before getting in on the action. Player to my left throws on the $6 straddle, so we know we're in for a good one today. Action folds all the way to the small blind on my right, who raises to 15. I'm next to act and look down at King 10. Since we have position on our opponent and he basically min-raised, I'm going to slide in calling chips and so does the player to my left. So we're going 3 ways to a flop of King 6-4 with 2 diamonds, giving us top pair decent kicker. I figured the small blind would be betting his entire range on this board, but surprisingly he starts off with a check. Now action's on me, and with both straight and flush draws available, I decided to throw out a bet of $20 for value and protection. Player to my left gets out of the way, but the small blind comes along for the ride, increasing this pot to 85. Since he didn't check raise, I think we could take aces, kings, ace king, and king queen off the table, so he most likely has a pair smaller than a king or maybe a flush draw. Keeping that in mind, we're off to a turn which rolls out the 3 of spades, putting 2 flush draws on the board, bringing in 7-5 for the straight, which is possible, but I think would be rare. He checks again. Now the only decision we have is how much to bet. I want to choose a sizing that will keep all those worse pairs than ours in the pot, but also charge just enough to give a flush draw the wrong odds to continue, but still call a bet. So I settle on a sizing of $45. Once again, our opponent puts in the call, increasing this pot to $175. Off to a river, which peels off a super interesting card in the King of Diamonds, giving us trips but bringing in the front door flush. Now our opponent takes over the betting lead and throws out a super small bet of just $50. Figured he would have bet all his King X hands on the flop, so I'm discounting those. So now I'm thinking he either has a flush or a smaller pair that's trying to set their price on the river. I don't see how I could fold trips for this sizing, so I flick in the call and he shows ace queen of diamonds for the nut flush. Son of a bitch! I thought he would have started a semi-bluff with diamonds on that amazing flop, but I guess that just wasn't the case. Once again, we're off to a horrific start. If I want to snap this mini downswing, I need to turn things around fast. I always like buying into the max at the 1-2, so I add on $100 to my stack and I'm now into the game for $400 total. Next hand up, I'm in the cutoff and look down at the infamous ace-king offsuit. Raise the price of poker to $10, get called by the button and big blind. Going 3 ways to a flop that I couldn't make up if I tried of ace-ace-king with 2 clubs, giving us top boat. Big blind starts off with a check. I could bet, but I wanted to check and see what develops. Button now bets out for $15. After the big blind gets out of the way, I decide to just flat. It's possible he has the case ace, but I'm mainly putting him on a king, and I don't want to scare him off. Going heads up to a turn which rolls out the 5 of clubs, bringing in the front door flush. I check and flow. Now he decides to check it back. I Figured all his flushes and aces would still bet, so I'm pretty sure he has a king at this point. Off to a river that shouldn't change anything in the 4 of diamonds. Since I'm mainly putting him on a king, I don't want to bet too big and scare him off, so I settle on a bet of $40 to which he quickly calls. I roll over my hand and it's obviously good. Feels nice to not have to wait around after adding on and scoop in our first pot of the day. The next hand occurs just a few orbits later when a player under the gun throws on the $7 straddle. Action folds all the way to me in the small blind. I look down at ace-3 of spades. Definitely good enough for a raise, so I raise 3x the size of the straddle to $21 and just get called by the big blind. Going heads up to a flop of 8-5 deuce with 1 spade giving us a gut shot to the wheel and a backdoor flush draw. Both the range advantage and equity, I throw out a c-bet of $20 to which he quickly calls. It's possible he has some Broadway hands he's floating with, but he most likely has a pair plus straight draw. Unless an ace, king, queen, or spade hit, I'll probably give up on the bluff. But no need to worry about that because we get the gin card and the 4 of hearts giving us the straight. 7-6 makes a higher straight, but if he has that, then he's just going to get all my chips. No need to slow down now, so I throw out a bet of $40 and he quickly calls once more. Since he didn't raise and called pretty quickly, I think we could condense his range even more. He probably has a hand like 8-7, 6-5, 5-4, or some type of hand that picked up a heart draw. Our opponent has around $100 left in his stack, so as long as a heart, 5, or 4 don't come out on the river, I'll be going all in. River rolls out the 10 of diamonds, so I stick to the plan and put our opponent to the test. He snap folds saying he missed, and we scoop in another solid pot. We battle back to get our stack a little above the even mark, but the game just went off the rails. Every hand I kept opening was getting 3-bet, sometimes even 4-bet, and I couldn't connect with any flops, so our stack took a little hit. A few orbits went by, and for this one I'm in early position and look down at pocket 6s. Sometimes I'd limp in this spot, but today I decided to raise it to $10. 3 people put in the call, now the button doesn't think 10 is enough and 3 bets to 55. He's a pretty aggressive opponent who's definitely capable of seeing $40 dead money out there, going for the squeeze. The obvious play would be to just fold and move on since we've only invested $10 so far. If we factor in that there's now $85 laying out there for me to win, I'm only losing to pocket pairs higher than 6s. It's time to implement the lightest 4-bet of my life and go all in. Beauty about this play is it puts hands like pocket 7s through pocket jacks in a horrible spot, so we might even have fold equity against hands that have us crushed. Even if we get called by ace king, we're still a favorite. He eventually decides on a fold, and we scoop in $85 of profit with a pair of balls. I mean 6s. Next hand up, under the gun limps. The button raises to $15, small blind calls, and I'm in the big blind and look down at king queen offsuit. I decided to play this one aggressive since I have some leftover adrenaline from that pocket 6's hand, putting a 3-bet to 55. The under the gun player who just called for $2 now cold calls my 3-bet. Usually this indicates pocket pairs or Broadway cards and not much else. Surprisingly, the button folds, now the small blind also calls. So the one person I was expecting to call, which was the pre-flop raiser on the button, is the only person who folds. Going 3 ways in a very bloated pot to a flop of ace-7-6 with 2 clubs giving us just king high and a dream. Small blind checks, now we have ourselves a decision. Beauty about this flop is neither of these opponents should have ace-king or ace-queen in their hand since under the gun limped pre-flop and the small blind didn't 3-bet the button next act. So I'm going to go for gold and rep those hands myself. I'm also ahead of every single flush draw that doesn't contain a 6 in it, so we have that going for us as well. I start off with a bluff of $55, which gets the player under the gun to fold. The small blind comes along for the ride. I figured he would have raised 7-6, pocket 7s, and pocket 6s, so I'm putting him on a naked ace, 9-8, or a flush draw, nothing else. Off to a turn with $275 in the pot, rolls out the 6 of clubs, pairing the board and bringing in the front door flush. Not the biggest fan of that card, especially now that our opponent leads into us for $100 even. Doesn't have much behind, so a bluff attempt at this point would be the dumbest play of my life. So So I wave the white flag against most likely a flush, toss my hand in the muck. For this hand, action folds to me in early position and I look down at ace-9 of clubs and open the action to $10. Folds to the hijack, who now 3-bets us to 25. Big blind cold calls. I debate 4-bet bluffing for a second. Figured I'm getting an amazing price to just call and see a flop. Going 3 ways to a flop of king 10-6 with 2 clubs giving us the nut flush draw. We check and flow to the hijack, who throws out a 2/3 size bet of $50. Big blind gets out of the way. Don't see a point in raising since this board hammers his 3-betting range, so I call, increasing this pot to 175, hoping for a club. It rolls out the jack of hearts. I check again. Surprisingly, our opponent checks it back. So now I'm putting him on a hand like queen jack or ace jack that has some type of showdown, but isn't feeling too comfortable in this spot. Off to a river, and rolls out a complete blank and the 3 of diamonds. Sitting here with just ace high, we have 2 options. Check and give up, or bluff and go for gold. I'm not one to usually give up, and our opponent has shown a lot of weakness by checking the turn, so I decide to rep 2 pair or better by throwing out a bet of $110. He doesn't snap call, so I'm feeling pretty good this bluff has a decent chance of getting through, until he decides to go all in, forcing us to fold. He ended up showing ace-queen offsuit for the nuts, and him checking the turn was risky because I could have hit a club for free, but in the end it was the right play because he made the most money possible. After getting caught bluffing back-to-back hands, I had on $200 more to my stack. I'm now into the game for $600 total. In this next hand, action folds to me in the cutoff, and I look down at 40% of a royal flush and ace-jack of hearts. I raise the price to play to $10, just get called by the big blind. Going heads up to a flop of king-10 with 2 diamonds, giving us a gut shot to Broadway and the backdoor nut flush draw. I start off with a range bet of $10 and he quickly calls. Pretty easy to range him on a 10, diamond draw, or queen jack, and not much else. Off to a turn which peels off the 4 of hearts, now giving us some more equity with the nut flush draw. He checks and flow. Now it's time to apply some more pressure. I throw out a bet of $25. Calls once more, increasing this pot to 90. Off to a river, and it rolls out the perfect card in the deck and the 6 of hearts, giving us the nut flush. He checks for a 3rd time. I think it's time to use my shitty image and bomb it to make my hand look like a bluff. So I throw out an overbet of $100, which sends our opponent in the tank. Since he didn't snap call, I think we could take a lot of his king X hands off the table. Since he didn't fold, him having queen jack is out of the question. So he's probably deciding why I'd bet this big with the king to try and scare him away. He eventually comes to a decision and unfortunately tosses his hand in the muck. Later found out he had 10-9. If I think we bet small, we might have got looked up light, but I wanted to use my table image to my advantage. At this point, I'm down $250, looking to build off that momentum from the ace-jack hand. I start the action off by looking at ace-deuce of hearts under the gun and deciding to limp for $2. Middle position limps. Now the cutoff raises to 15. Small blind calls. I call. And so does the player in middle position, so we're going 4 ways to a flop of 7-3 deuce rainbow with 1 heart, giving us bottom pair with some backdoor draws. Action gets checked to the cutoff, who throws out a c-bet of $20. Small blind calls. And since I could potentially draw to the nuts, decide to call as well, but obviously have to proceed with caution. Player in middle position folds. With 120 in the middle, we're off to a turn 3 ways, which peels off the king of clubs. I check, now looking to give up to any aggression, but surprisingly action gets checked through. I was debating if I had to use this turn card as a scare card for a bluff, but no need because the river rolls out the ace of diamonds, giving us 2 pair. Action gets checked to me. I don't think anyone is that strong, but I still need to get value from any ace-5 or ace-4 hands, so I throw out a value bet of $45. Folds all the way back to the small blind, who now min check raises to 90. If I had a better 2 pair, I would have called it off, but he's obviously not bluffing for $45 more. I just don't see how there's any worse hands than mine that are taking this line for value. To me, this line screams 5-4 or ace-3 all day here, especially since he check min raised. So I decided to just toss my shitty 2 pair in the muck and move on. After losing with pocket nines, I added on another Benjamin to my stack, so I was now into the game for $700. Then couldn't connect with jack shit the rest of the day, so let's get to the outro.
I was never going to pull off a win this session. I could have easily limited the damage and not make a couple bad bluffs. In for 700, now for 308 for a massive $392 loss.
For day 2, we decided to play in the 1-3 match stack game and buy in for $500. I've currently lost 4 straight sessions, so I'm going to do my best to snap this losing streak today. This game is already off the rails because everyone decided to do a round of $15 straddles, and it was my turn to throw it on. 5 people called the $15. When action folds to me, I look down at Ace-10 offsuit. There's $75 of dead money out there. No one showed too much strength, so with only 30 big blinds in my stack, I'm not going to make the same mistake as last week and play it passive. Instead, I'm just going to close my eyes and go all in. I like this play because it could get better hands like Ace-Jack and Ace-Queen to fold and make it really hard for a middling pair to call. Even if they do, I'm still flipping and in decent shape. But as expected, everyone ends up tossing their hands in the muck and we scoop in an easy profit. Next hand up, we get involved in a local famous $15 bomb pot. 8 people decided to join the party and I got dealt Queen-6 offsuit. With 120 in the pot, we're off to a flop 8 ways of Queen-9-5 with 2 hearts giving us a shitty top pair. First to act and start off with the check, gets checked around to the cutoff who throws out a super small bet of $25. Not really loving this spot because I'm in the worst position possible. For this price, I'm just never folding, so I slide in the chips and so does a player in middle position and the hijack. Pot's now up to 220, the turn rolls out the jack of diamonds. I check and flow, now action gets checked through. Still not feeling great about our hand, especially when the river peels off the 3 of hearts, bringing in the front door flush. Nothing to do than check. Surprisingly, action gets checked through. I roll over my hand and end up chopping with the cutoff who has Queen-4 of clubs. Not the most exciting hand, but if it wasn't for bomb pots these last few sessions, I'd be in a lot worse shape. Next hand up, the cutoff opens to $15, button calls, small blind calls. I'm in the big blind and look down at pocket 8s. Could just call and try and hit a set, but the first open was from the cutoff, which means he could be opening a lot wider in late position. Since these other 2 players didn't 3-bet him, they're probably not strong at all. But I think my pocket 8s are ahead the majority of the time, which is why I 3-bet to $85. The original raiser decides to throw in the extra 70. As expected, the other 2 get out of the way. Off to a flop heads up with $200 already in the pot, and it comes out King-10-9 with 2 diamonds giving us just 4th pair. Obviously not the best flop in the world for pocket 8s, but I think this board favors my range more than his, so I start off with a c-bet of $75 and he quickly calls, increasing this pot to $350. I think he could easily have a king in this spot that we're way behind of. There's still a decent amount of hands we're beating like Ace-Queen, Ace-Jack, and all the smaller flush draws. Keeping that in mind, we're off to a turn which peels off the 9 of spades, pairing the board. Now I have a decision. Turn my pocket 8s into a bluff and rep a monster, or check and pick up information. This player has been playing pretty passive today, so I figured if I checked any bet, it most likely means he has a king. But if he checked it back, then he was trying to see a free river with his ace high hands and flush draws. So I check to see what he does. He decides to check it back, which I love to see. Off to a river which rolls out a complete blank and the 3 of hearts. At this point, I'm just trying to get to showdown. If he bets a massive sizing, I might have to call it off because I don't see him having a monster after checking back the turn, since he would have needed a lot of protection with the made hand. But luckily it doesn't come to that, and he checks it back and our pocket 8s are somehow good. For this one, I throw on the $6 under the gun straddle, and 4 people end up calling, and I look down at 8-6 of clubs. This hand isn't good enough for a raise, especially out of position, so I just check my option, and we're going 5 ways to a flop of 7-6 deuce rainbow, giving us middle pair with some backdoor opportunities. Felt like I needed to get my value now and see where I'm at, so I lead out for $15, get called by the button and big blind. Can't define ranges just yet. We're off to a wild turn in the 8 of diamonds, giving us 2 pair, but bringing in some straights and also a diamond draw. Big blind checks. Now it's time to increase the price to play. I decide to bet $45 to charge all the pair plus straight draws. Once again, both players put in the call, increasing this pot to 210. Probably could have gone even bigger. Feeling pretty good I'm in the lead since no one raised. Off to a river hoping for an 8 or 6 to make my life easy, but instead it peels off the worst card in the deck and the 9 of diamonds, putting 4 to a straight and bringing in the backdoor flush. Big blind checks. I obviously check. Now the button throws out a little under a half pot bet of $100. Big blind gets out of the way. I don't see how the button can have any hand that's betting this size that we're beating, even how a bluff got to this point. So I make the easy fold and move on. This next hand, a tighter player under the gun opens the action to $15. When it's my turn to act, I look down at ace queen of spades. Usually I'd 3-bet this hand 90% of the time in this spot, but this specific opponent has a tight under the gun opening range, so I proceed with caution and just call. Mainly putting him on suited Broadway cards and big pocket pairs. 3 more people put in the call, which is always the risk when you flat pre-flop, but I'd rather see a flop than get 4-bet out of one. So going 5 ways to a flop of queen 10-7 with 2 hearts, giving us top pair, top kicker. Original raiser starts off with a check, which in my opinion gives us the green light to bet. So I throw out a value bet of $50 into a pot of 75, and surprisingly just get called by the original raiser. The live read I have on our opponent's range is big suited Broadway cards like ace jack, ace king, king jack, and king queen with or without hearts, or a hand like pocket jacks and not much else. So keeping that in mind, we're off to a turn which peels off the 9 of hearts, bringing in the front door flush. He checks and flow. I felt like this was a bad card because king jack makes the straight and all the front door hearts get there. I decide to implement some pot control and check it back. So we're off to a river, which also isn't a good card, and the jack of diamonds now giving ace king Broadway. Of course, our opponent decides to go all in for about 180. Don't really see any bluffs he could have or value bets that we're beating, so I toss my hand in the muck and he shows the jackasses, pocket jacks for the rivered set. A little unlucky he got there on the river, but that's just the way poker's been going lately. Played for just a little bit longer because I decided I needed to lock up a win after those grueling 4 straight losses, get some momentum back on my side, so let's get to the outro.
Not the craziest session, but I'm super pumped to break this 4-session losing streak. In for the original 500, and out for 578 for a decent little win of $78.
As for this week in poker, I played 5 hours and 35 minutes and lost a total of $314 for an hourly win rate of negative $56.24. That's back-to-back losing weeks for me, but just glad I snapped the losing streak in the last session. Fortunately, after that day 1 loss, our 1-2 stats took a big hit. I've now played 79 hours even in this game and profited $1,462 for an hourly win rate of $18.51. Little disappointed my win rate is under 10 big blinds an hour now, but still have time to get it back up. As for our 1-3 stats, I've played 80 hours even in this game and profited $4,122 for an hourly win rate of $51.53. If it takes running like shit in 1-2 to keep the 1-3 hourly win rate up, I'll take it. If we combine these stats, I've now played 159 total hours of live poker in 2025, profited $5,584 for an hourly win rate of $35.12. Kinda sucks to take a good hit to the hourly number, but if you were to tell me in January this is where I'd be in September after an abysmal start to the year, I'd be thrilled. The key to winning consistently at poker is to always keep the glass half full mindset, which will help me to try and bounce back next week. Thanks for watching, and as always, I hope you guys run good at the tables. I'd appreciate it if you could hit the subscribe button to help me reach my new year-end goal of 25,000 subscribers.